Greetings, friends. Welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm thrilled to be here with you guys today. Hope you're staying warm out there. I know Florida, we've had a frost and that almost devastated our whole entire life, right? I think it was like down in the 30s. And, the little plants that I had, too bad. Rest in peace for some of them, right? So, but anyways, with that said, hey, I want to go ahead and get started with the announcements. First things first, the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on the Spotify podcast network, and then also all of my social media platforms. If you've been following me, I have a million platforms. Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indy238. YouTube is India White 123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. In addition to that, please check out the website. I always have really cool updates for you guys, whether it's a blog or, update on a new book, things like that. Check that out whenever you get a chance. You can check me out for speaking or coaching event. In addition to that, we do have the upcoming Making Math Moments conference. My session will be on Saturday. It is free to register. So check out Making Math Moments. It's a nice virtual summit with some of the top math leaders. I'm just honored to be in the room with these phenomenal people. My session is on Saturday at 1:30, and it's on making grit work, because you already know I'm going to have the T when it comes down to grit. In addition to that, please check out the grit workshop, still going on the Grassroots Workshops website. Thank you to Robert and the team for this opportunity. The name of that workshop is How to Harness Grit to Help Students Thrive. I know that's a mouthful. I think you could just keyword type, like search grit, and you'll find it there. I'm so thankful for all these different platforms that I've ever utilized any of these works. I mean, I remember when I first started in this journey from, Math Nation to other, textbook companies, and now Savvis. I'm just thankful for everybody that has given me an opportunity. And I also want to remind you guys of any tutoring opportunities through the Grit Academy. I'm always ready to take, new students or help students with their SAT, ACT preps and things like that. So with that said, I'm so thankful that you guys are joining me. I'm super honored to bring back to the show one of my favorites, someone that has been wonderful, that we have been cheering on since he has been a student in Hillsborough County Schools, and now as an advocate for the community. I want to bring back to the Let's Get Gritty podcast, Alexander Rivera. Hello, Alexander. How are you?
Good evening, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yes. Follow the audience for those that don't know you, because I know I stream this globally. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I think you pretty much summarized it. I'm a community leader and advocate, specifically for education here in Hillsborough County, for the last 6 years, and I've enjoyed every single minute of it. Just being able to be involved in my community, making sure that everybody has a seat at the table. Because doing this work requires a lot of resilience, requires a lot of persistence, especially to get certain policies across to the finish line. As you've mentioned, I am a former Hillsborough County School student, currently, and I'm a proud graduate of Wharton High School, class of 25. And my current career is going to be, we're in the midst of college, and you know, we're hopeful to get across that finish line to wrap up my first semester in December.
Excellent. So talk to us a little bit about grit, what your definition is of grit, and maybe a time that you've recently had to use grit that you want to share with the audience.
Oh, absolutely. So grit, in my definition, is one that has a lot of resilience and a lot of courage. And so back in September, I recently underwent a procedure that did not go as successful as I hoped. 2 weeks later, I was in the hospital for septic shock, and then a week, spent that, 6 days in ICU, and then 2 days in regular PCU, progressive care unit. And so after that, I was sent home, was not even home a week and a half, and had a heart attack, which required, another surgery, and I
How
spent
old are
another
you,
week in the hospital.
Alexander? Yeah.
I
How
was
old are you?
19 years old. I'm now 20, and by the grace of God, I'm very lucky to be here talking
Yes.
you and your, and the viewers. And so that for me was very challenging because I didn't know, what was going on. But I am very grateful to the amazing team of doctors and nurses who were basically around the clock, making sure that my vitals were okay, making sure that I was, that I was, as you know, I'm resilient, so I don't go up without a fight easily.
That's right. Wow.
I almost wanted to concede defeat when, when I felt at my weakest point. But I have to tell you that having that experience is one that will stick with me for the rest of my life because at my age, you don't expect to hear that a 19-year-old specific, and not to mention when they did my surgery, I unfortunately they lost me for a second, but I was, had to be shocked 3 times. So that was very,
Do you remember anything from that?
the only thing I remember is just, hearing the doctors, say, stay with me, don't concede, don't give up. And I had a nurse behind me who was probably in her early 30s, and she started to pray. And, and I remember, I wanted to close my eyes, but I knew that it wasn't timing. And so, having to go through, resilience, especially when I was in the hospital twice, and then, I felt that God was calling me to a higher purpose. That in that higher purpose was if I can, stand here and fight this, then I can fight for my community through grit.
Wow. I'm so glad you did not give up the fight because my little world would have been torn apart if you would have left us. But you are a survivor of a heart
Yes,
attack.
ma'am.
Was it just one heart attack or what happened? What did they say?
It was one heart attack, and so essentially my right side of my heart was 100% blocked by a blood clot. And so I did not know about this blood clot until I went in for surgery and they had to put 2 stents in. And
Yeah.
it was and as a result of this, I'm now on a blood thinner for the rest of my life. I'm now having to go to cardiac rehab, which I'm very grateful that my mother has been kind enough to help me through this journey because she has not left my side not one single time. And I have to give credit to to the person who made me into being that
Exactly.
fighter, to be that
Wow.
challenger, to know that even though in times of something serious as having a heart attack, I knew that I had faith in the Lord first and foremost, but I also had faith in my in prayer.
Yeah.
And so and when I was in the hospital, it really opened my mind very much so to be closer to God and to deliver what He has in store for me, and that's being a community leader, being a survivor, and just overall sharing His will through grit.
Yeah. Now, my question is, it definitely took grit for you to make it through that. What were the signs, or did you feel anything different? Or was this during a procedure that this happened? Like, did you have any symptoms that you were aware of, or were you already under? Like, what happened?
So Tuesday, as I said earlier, I'm a community leader. So Tuesday, because my heart attack was Thursday, so Tuesday, I was at the Hillsborough County Legislative Delegation. And for those of you who don't know, in the state of Florida, we have the state legislature, but also we have what's called a legislative delegation. So it's a panel comprising of however many representatives to, I think it's 8 representatives to 3 senators, at least in Hillsborough County. And while at delegation, of course, my mentor, Susan Valdez, who's a state representative, was in the audience. And they noticed that that I was not feeling up to par in the way that I should. I was not, feeling very well the night before. And, I even told my mom, I said, come hell or high water, I'm going to continue fighting for my community until the very end. I'll go
Wow,
up there even if I'm weak,
that's
because I
great.
want
Yeah.
to deliver for my community. And so one of the warning signs that I didn't know it at the time was I was having a little bit of back pain. Was having pain in my jaw from having 4 wisdom teeth pulled, and so that for me was the deal breaker. But the real deal breaker was the day of my heart attack. I again I was having that back pain, but it was so severe that to the point where I had to sit down. And I remember having the symptoms of heart attack. I was feeling very clammy. felt very, very dizzy. And so I told my grandmother who was visiting me from Georgia, she's still with us, and I told her, I said, and I handed her my cell phone and I said, I'm going to need you to call the paramedics. And I gave her the password to my phone, paramedics came. And I do have to give a special shout out to the Pasco Fire Rescue and Advent Health and Wesley Chapel, because had it not would have been for them
Mm,
to really, have the resilience and the courage, because let's just face it, that being a nurse and being a doctor and, the being a firefighter, especially, in times of crisis like this, was very important. And I'm so very grateful to my community for really standing by my side through this big hurdle.
yeah.
And, including my mother's job, which is where my mom works. So, and, I'm very humbled, that I live in a community where there's a lot of representation, but, also, that we have amazing people like my mother who work in the medical field.
Right. Wow. Um, so you talk about grit. Has this opened up another lens of grit for you that maybe you didn't think about before?
In a way, yes. I have to say it has opened up a new
Yeah.
lens because, it's broaden my horizons to know because I'm so as I mentioned earlier, it's about community, and when you have community who come together, who people who you've never even met before, until you walk, it's like walking through um I don't know, maybe a tunnel, and you're trying to reach the light at the end of that tunnel. You want to see light, you want to see vibrance, you want that to happen. And so, I think that it has opened my door to being not just an advocate for education, but a variety of things from
Yeah.
healthcare
Yeah.
to our community. And I use the term community because, well, the community was there for me at my weakest point.
Yes.
And
And
so,
so when you talk about healthcare now, how did
mhm.
healthcare, like talk about why it was so important for you? How did healthcare really kind of come to your saving grace, literally, during this moment?
So I think that, when I had and I love how you use the term saving grace because I can tell you right now, specifically at Advent Health and Wesley Chapel, what I love about it the most is that we have a state-of-the-art lab that is specifically designed for, people who do have heart attacks. They can, go in, it's called cath lab. So it's essentially it's almost like an OR, but you don't go through, I think, you're sedated. But, I remember bits and parts about my procedure and I also have to give a shout out to my cardiologist, who was basically on the forefront, who was literally across the street at her
Wow.
office. And when she got that phone call, she said, and I remember her coming into the OR and she told me, she's like, we're gonna give you some medicine to feel better. And and then, she even, had one of her colleagues when she wasn't there, one of her colleagues came and,
What's her
saw
name?
me, Priyanka Gill, phenomenal cardiologist.
GILL.
Yes, she's a phenomenal doctor who really took the time into
Wow.
not just addressing my concerns, but the needs of others. And so when she wasn't available, she actually sent one of her colleagues from the same practice to come and see me at my bedside to see how I was doing, and
Yeah.
then we reported back to her. So that alone for me was transformative. Having, a broad coalition of not just doctors, but nurses as well, who were, as I said, at the forefront really was an impacting experience. And, I think when I was in the hospital, you know, I call it the divine intervention. I know a lot of people had their rock bottoms, and I think when I was at my rock bottom, I think that, God was speaking to me saying, listen, you're destined for a higher purpose. And, now I'm listening to, and, me and God I mean, we were close, but, we were at a crossroads almost. You
Yeah.
know, now I'm closer to God than I've ever been before. I feel like a rebirth, an absolute rebirth. My
Yeah.
cholesterol is, lower than it ever been before. It's,
Mhm.
my health, when I entered the hospital the first time for sepsis, I was in the 300s. I'm now down to the 200s. I'm
Good.
260.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
trying to eat healthier, trying to make decisions that are right for not just me, but for my diet. So I'm doing things that are different. And, as I said earlier, I feel like I've been reborn, like I've been rebaptized almost.
Yeah. God is so merciful, and I'm just emotional because I think this is touching to me. I'm thankful you overcame it and survived. Not many people are able, to live and,
Hmm.
continue. So I'm grateful, and you mean a lot to me. So this is kind of emotional. Um, so what's in it for you now? What are you going to do now? It seems like you have a new purpose. It seems like maybe your purpose was adjusted a little bit. Talk to us about it.
So my purpose, as I mentioned, is I've been destined for public service for a very long time, and this
Yeah.
is something that I've shared openly with other people specifically, and I've had multiple conversations with my family and with different people, and I used to tell them, I said, you know what, politics isn't my game. I never thought it was, but
Yeah.
but then as I looked back, on
Hmm.
photos and going through memories on Facebook, it reminded me, okay, you are destined for a higher purpose because of the community that has been around you the entire time. You know, my godmother's a state legislator, and a former school board member, and so
Hmm.
and I've had conversations with Representative Valdez very openly about the possibility of me running for office, and when I went to Tallahassee back in
Yeah.
January,
Hmm.
back in January of this year, I was fortunate enough to go to Tallahassee with my church, so I was able to experience what government was like. I never been that close to government, but I can tell you when you get to the entrance of the House chamber, how like you get butterflies in your stomach when you enter a new building for the first time. That's exactly what it felt like. It felt like this is my calling. This is
Yeah.
who I want to serve. The people of Florida, the work that we do, and it really, as I mentioned, it opened a whole new gateway. I call it a floodgate because I have, what I call my tribe. I have principals, I've got school
Mhm.
counselors, state representatives on my Facebook, just, and I keep in touch with them on a consistent basis. And that's, in order to get things done, you have to have that open door,
Yes, you do.
when I'm, and so, when I was in, I can tell you right now, if I was elected right now, I would have an open door policy. You want to talk about an issue? Come see me. I'm not going to be, hiding behind a desk 24/7. I'm going to be out serving my community.
Hmm.
Whether it's a food bank, whether it's, helping the homeless and, making sure that, they're getting assessed properly and getting, possible, healthcare that they need. So it's, it's very heartening, when, there's a lot of times when we see a lot of people who are all talk and not actually walking the walk. And so I think that, um, when I've had conversations with Representative Valdez about this, and she's like, I quite agree, because there are certain people who, certain electeds who I think should, do exactly that. They want to walk the walk, but they're not doing the work that the people have elected them to do. And so it's
It's tough.
unfortunate, but in the same
That
token,
is.
we have our voice. Voice
Mm.
your opinion, and let's continue on. The legacy, the rich legacy. I know for a fact that my great grandparents who came here from Spain and Puerto Rico, I can tell you right now, if they were alive today, they'd be like, "Just keep going, kid. You're one step closer to reaching your big
Mhm.
goal."
Right.
You know,
Excellent. So then you're really thinking about maybe possibly running for office soon. Um,
possibly.
and so are you thinking about going back to school as well?
So absolutely, because as I mentioned earlier, my godmother is a state representative. So, and she's told me ever since I was a little kid, think you probably stay in school.
Mhm.
So I'm going to hold myself to that standard. So that means, after I graduate from Hillsborough College, I'm going to FSU studying interdisciplinary social science. For those who don't know what that is basically covering the four corners of economics, English, literature, two foreign languages. It's almost like a liberal arts degree, but for political science. And it's at Florida State. So, even though I'm a no, I'm going to be apologizing up front if we beat the Gators. I'm sorry. But so, so I can say right now, school has played a pivotal point in my life. That's actually the whole base, I actually, checked off all four boxes of what got me into activism to begin with, me being a public school student. I was in, as I mentioned, I was in Hillsborough County schools from 2008 to 2025. So if almost 18 years or just about that point. So I know exactly, I've seen the ins and outs and, also attending a school board meeting where, you know, I actually got a behind the scenes tour before the meeting even began, was going to meet with area directors, area superintendents, and, making my rounds. And, actually there on my Facebook, there's a photo of me sitting on the dais of my school board. And I remember a colleague of mine from the school board, I think it was Mr. Shake Washington, who I live and adore. He says to me, he goes, "Son, I think you're going to be sitting up this board once I retire." I said, "I don't know about that, but I can tell you right now, it's worth
Oh,
a try. It's worth a try because we need real representation." And he has been doing that over the last 6 years,
yes,
and I
he
think he's
has.
doing a
He is
phenomenal job.
fabulous. He is fabulous. Yes.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so then one thing I want to kind of bring it back to your experience, um,
Mhm,
youth that have, health things that they're battling, whether it's cancers, heart
mhm.
attacks, and things. I guess what message of grit do you have maybe for them or for their community as to how they can be supportive towards students and, younger adults like yourself that have these more
Mhm.
serious and more chronic, situations that they're battling?
So my advice would be don't give up. We're all survivors. Even in,
Mm.
sometimes, and unfortunately in a lot of cases, people oftentimes, do pass from their illness. But I can tell you, as I said earlier, nobody can go up without a fight. Just fight and pray. Have
Yeah.
resilience, have courage, don't give up. Just remember that, if you are struggling, even in times of crisis, you know, pray about it, talk to, your family, your neighbor, your pastor. I know that when I was in the hospital for my heart attack, and then when I had sepsis and went into septic shock, I had my wonderful pastor, Pastor Gabriel Morgan of St. Paul Lutheran Church in Seminole Heights. I remember him coming to my bedside, and I remember him, telling me, that, we're all destined for great things. And, even though, we are struggling, and even though we are in times of crisis, you will succeed. Even when you feel like giving up, just know that don't give up.
Hmm. Right.
Be resilient. And, I will, even if it's a colleague of mine that is suffering, whether they're going through depression, whether they're going through something, I tell them all the time, I'm like, listen, I have your back. If you need anything, don't be too hesitant to ask. Um, if you need a prayer, if you need somebody to talk to, a shoulder to cry on, even, I'm here. I'm not going to be, one of those people who just slams the door and says, have a good day. No, that's not
Right.
me. That's not how I was raised. How I
Right.
was raised is to give back to the community, to be, to be drawn to public service, to being able to some degree, being able to help those who suffer. And so, yeah.
Right. So my question too is, I mean, you are such a survivor. I think you're a new poster face for those that are surviving different hardships. Um,
Mhm.
how did how has grit helped you afterwards? Like how have you been able to process having a growth mindset, being resilient, believing in yourself, having that self-efficacy that I can still do things, or having goal setting? How have different parts of that framework, how has that helped you today as you move forward?
Well, after I was discharged from the hospital, the recovery, has been challenging. I can, say that it hasn't been easy. But in the same token, though, as I've mentioned earlier, I'm surrounded by community. I'm surrounded by the fact that, I have my, when I was in the hospital and, my church learned that I was in the hospital, and I was receiving text messages and phone calls and, my phone was ringing and ringing and ringing. I was like, okay, I can only answer one person at a time, and it was like, almost like, it was like a call service, just, one phone call after another. But to answer your question, I think that through prayer and through, just, telling yourself, listen, you can't give up, you're here for a purpose. I think, in a way was not only self-motivating for me, but it was, it was like, as I mentioned earlier, it was like a gateway. We're destined for higher things in life. And so when I remember telling one of my friends, I can't do this, and she's like, listen, I don't want you giving up. You've come such a long way. Yes, it's been challenging, but you can't give up without a good fight. It's
Right.
like, almost like Mike Tyson. You don't accept defeat in the end. You
Mhm.
support each other. Shake each other's hands at the end of the match. And that's the way that it was with me, with my doctor, because, she never
Mhm.
gave up on me, and, my mother never gave up on me, and
Yeah.
so I think, by
That's
having
right.
her be with me, and, as I said earlier, even in times of crisis, and how hard it was for her, you know, and then, going through her own challenges as well,
She's a woman
it's a
of
big
spirit.
hurdle, but she's also a survivor.
Yes,
Her
she is.
kid, she battled, she even broke her hand in the midst of me being in the hospital, fractured her arm in three different places, but that didn't stop her from pursuing her college degree. She's
Right.
still going. She's like me, we have grit. And I, tell her oftentimes, I'm
Yes,
like,
you do.
remember what India says, don't give up, have a great deal amount of courage, and remember that you are destined for higher things. Even though when you feel like you're alone in a room, it attracts more people.
Excuse me. Yeah, just that moment when I got the information, um, I just immediately started praying. Um, but I must say, I have to give kudos to your mom. Strong, powerful woman. And give kudos to you. And I think it's so interesting because we just had TEDx Ocala this past weekend. Shout out to my TEDx peeps. Um, and it was so neat going there and seeing everybody be all gritty and up in spirit. But this takes me back to when I was on the TED stage and I was talking to people. And there was a part of the speech where I said, grit is the pushback against life's obstacles. Um, there's something about your story that makes that one sentence live. It's like you took that moment that I
Mhm.
had on the stage, and it's almost like you've embedded this, you've you've interwoven this into almost every facet of your life. And I'm seeing the power of grit in your family. And I'm seeing you guys be these like grit warriors where you are accomplishing so much in a different way. The resilience is tremendous. But the thing I love about it is that once you guys, of course, you're over the hurdle, over the big part, but it's like once you keep going, because you understand grit and you understand what it's like to be survivors and to not give up, the comeback is going to be so powerful. You guys are going to be unstoppable. And now, because you shared this moment as a family, you're unbeatable. Like you can't be defeated. And so, I just want to let you know I'm so proud of you and I'm thankful to the Lord that he helped you fight. And I'm thankful to your doctors, to everyone that had a part to play, to everybody that prayed, to everybody that believed in you. But I am so proud of you for continuing to still want to fight and not play victim, but to really say, although I went through this, I'm still here to now advocate for those that might not have a voice or those that, might still be
Absolutely.
struggling and they can't quite get it out the way I can. Now it's like it's strengthened your fight, it's strengthened your message. And so this has touched me to my core. This really has. And it's you have taught me some things about grit in this moment. I know I'm like the grit princess. I'm out here doing this, but your lived story, your lived experience, from your mom's testimony is very moving for me. And I just thank you all. I thank you so much, and your mom, and the wonderful community in Tampa Bay. What a beautiful community. I'm just thankful for everybody that had a part to do with helping you push forward, and just realize we are always going to be in your corner. You'll always have a place on this platform, or, you know, anything I can do for you and your family. You already know I'm in your corner 100%. And now we get to celebrate as we remain gritty and we continue to push forward. So I am looking forward to seeing who you're going to evolve into, whether that's a congressman, a board member, whatever. But all I know is that once I see your name on a
You'll be
ballot,
on board.
I know that once I see your name on a ballot, or I see you in office or whatever, I'm 100% behind it. I know you're going to do some great things, and, you know, but until then, we're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep pushing forward,
Yep,
and it's going to be through
absolutely.
grit. So, you know, do you have any last words for us, Alexander, on the show as we're wrapping
So,
up?
absolutely. So, in conclusion, I just want to say thank you again, India, because I know that, this journey has not been easy without, the prayers of, not just your viewers, but the viewers of, those far and wide, and,
Yeah.
I also have to give credit to my amazing godmother, Representative Susan Valdez
Yes.
out of District 64 for not just equipping me to be a leader, but to also share what it means to be resilient
Yes.
in times of crisis. So I am, as I've mentioned, I'm so deeply humbled by the outpour of prayers that I've received, and
Yes.
I will continue to be that advocate until the very end. This is not the end of my journey. This is
Amen.
only just the beginning.
Amen. That's right. That's right. Through grit, God's going to help you make it happen. So thank you again, Alexander, for coming. Is there any, would you like to leave any information with the people that want to contact you after?
Yes, so my email is Alexander B. Rivera 61 at gmail.com.
Okay.
If I don't answer right away, please give me a little bit of time as I'm beginning my recovery process, as I'm entering rehabilitation. Thank God it's outpatient, but just continue to pray for me. And if you have any questions, I'll try to, email me and I will get back to you as soon as possible. You can also reach me by phone at 813-860-3678. Please leave me, if I don't answer, leave me a voicemail and I will get back to you as soon as possible. But thank you again, India, for having me. And this is, as I said earlier, this is just the beginning. So
Just the
thank you.
beginning. And guys, thank you so much again for joining us on this powerful, powerful podcast tonight, the Let's Get Gritty podcast. I'm so thankful that you guys are able to join me on the show. Please also check out my website, www.india-white.com. Check us out at our event that we've got going on as well. We'll be talking about grit, making grit work. That is going to be at the Making Math Moments session. So I will see you guys there Saturday at 1:30. And until next time, stay gritty. See ya.